Hey everyone, welcome to the human side of hospitals. I'm so glad you are here. And now on this channel, we don't just talk about medicine, we listen to real people, to patients, to doctors, nurses, caregivers, anyone who has an unforgettable hospital experience. The hospitals can be places of healing, hope, sometimes even heartbreak, and every story has something to teach us. That is why I'm starting this, just to give people a space to share, to be heard, and to remind us that behind every hospital wall are human beings with stories worth telling. Now, here's where you come in. So, if you've ever been a patient, if you've worked in a hospital, or if you've supported a loved one through their hospital journey, I would love to hear from you. And you can send me a short video, audio, just write your story down. Or if you would like to sit and chat with me, you can join me live on Zoom. And all you have to do is just fill the form in the description below, or you can send me an email. And it doesn't matter where you are from, who you are, or whatsoever. You are welcome wherever part of the world you come from. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell. Basically, not to miss these incredible voices from around the world. And a quick disclaimer before we start: these stories, their personal stories, shared with full consent, and we are here just to inspire, educate, and raise awareness. One thing is those who want to remain anonymous, well, for the sake of confidentiality and privacy, altered some of their voices into AI voices. And note that even the advice shared in these videos or in these experiences, they are not a substitute for medical advice. Always remember this. And if you have health concerns, always speak to a qualified healthcare professional. All right, let's dive into today's story.
I'm Dr. Benjamin Voss, Chief of Inpatient Psychiatry at Riverside Medical Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Or rather, I was until I handed in my resignation 3 weeks ago after 22 years of dedicated service to the field of mental health. My credentials speak for themselves. MD from Johns Hopkins, residency at Massachusetts General, fellowship in forensic psychiatry at Yale. I've published 47 peer-reviewed papers on treatment-resistant schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. I've testified as an expert witness in over 200 legal cases. I've treated everyone from Silicon Valley executives having nervous breakdowns to convicted murderers claiming demonic possession. In my time at Riverside Medical Center, I've diagnosed everything from garden variety depression to the most complex cases of dissociative identity disorder. I've seen patients who believe they were historical figures, others who claim to receive messages from dead relatives, and countless individuals convinced that government agencies were monitoring their thoughts. I have witnessed the full spectrum of human psychological distress, and I thought I understood the intricate machinery of the human mind better than most. But what I'm about to share with you is a singular case that shattered my understanding of psychiatric medicine, forced me to confront possibilities that exist far beyond the It's the case that made me realize there are phenomena in this world that our textbooks, our diagnostic manuals, and our clinical training cannot adequately explain or address. The Riverside Medical Center Psychiatric Unit occupies the entire fourth floor of our hospital, composing of brick called to inform me that would be receiving the patient within the hour. The individual in question was a 34-year-old software engineer named Trevor Nakamura, who had been found wandering downtown Milwaukee in a state of apparent psychological distress, claiming to have no memory of the previous 72 hours. Doctor, we've got a strange one here, Detective Kozlov explained. No signs of substance abuse, no head trauma, no medical issues that would explain the memory loss. But he keeps asking about things that happen in places he's never been, with people he's never met. The family's requesting a psychiatric evaluation. I reviewed Mr. Nakamura's preliminary information as he prepared for his arrival. According to the police report, he worked for a cybersecurity firm downtown, lived alone in a modest apartment, and had no significant psychiatric history. His employer had reported him missing when he failed to show up for work Monday morning, which was apparently completely out of character. Mr. Nakamura arrived at 3:30 p.m., accompanied by 2 patrol officers and his younger sister, Catherine. My first impression was of a man who appeared physically healthy, but profoundly confused. He was of average height, with neat black hair, and wore the same clothes he'd been found in: dark jeans, a gray sweater, and running shoes. His vital signs were completely normal. Blood pressure 118/74, heart rate 68, temperature 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, oxygen saturation 95%. What struck me immediately was his demeanor. Most patients experiencing acute psychological episodes present with obvious signs of distress, rapid speech, agitation, paranoid glances, or withdrawal. Mr. Nakamura exhibited none of these behaviors. Instead, he seemed almost eerily calm, sitting quietly in the intake room, his hands folded in his lap, answering my questions with a polite but distant manner. Mr. Nakamura, can you tell me your full name and today's date? I began with standard cognitive assessment questions. Trevor James Nakamura. Today is Tuesday, October 17th, 2023. He replied without hesitation. Good. And where are you right now? Riverside Medical Center, Milwaukee. 4th floor, psychiatric. His responses were accurate and delivered in a flat, emotionless tone. Can you tell me what you remember about the last few days? This was where his presentation became genuinely puzzling. Mr. Nakamura tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear, then looked directly at me with an expression I can only describe as profound sadness. I remember being in places that don't exist, Doctor. I remember conversations with people who died before I was born. I remember working on projects that haven't been invented yet. He paused, then added, and I remember things about you that I shouldn't possibly know. What kind of things about me? I asked, maintaining my professional composure while making notes. You have a scar on your left shoulder from when you fell off your bicycle when you were 8 years old. You were trying to impress a girl named Sarah, who lived 3 houses down from you in Columbus, Ohio. The scar is shaped like a crescent moon, and you still think about it sometimes when you're getting dressed in the morning. I stopped writing. The accuracy of this statement was impossible to explain. I do indeed have a crescent-shaped scar on my left shoulder from exactly such an incident when I was 8 years old in Columbus. Sarah Brennan was her name. And yes, I do occasionally notice the scar when changing clothes. This information exists nowhere in any public record, medical file, or database that a stranger could access. How could you possibly know that? I asked, struggling to maintain clinical objectivity. I don't know how I know it, he replied with that same sad expression. Just like I don't know how I know that your colleague, Dr. Martinez, 408, is about to receive very bad news about her father's test results, or that the patient in room 416 is going to attempt to harm himself tonight at 11:42 p.m. Dr. Elena Martinez worked in our outpatient clinic. father had been undergoing cancer screening tests, but this information was strictly confidential family matter. As for room 416, that housed Mr. Poku Chen, a middle-aged man being treated for severe depression following divorce. I excused myself to consult with our nursing staff and review Mr. Nakamura's initial blood work and toxicology screening. Everything came back completely normal. No alcohol, no controlled substances, no prescription medications that might cause confusion or hallucinations. His complete blood count, comprehensive metabolic pattern, and thyroid function tests were all within perfect normal ranges. At 4:45 p.m., I was reviewing his case with my colleague, Dr. Sarah Foster, when my phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Martinez. Ben, just got Dad's pathology results. It's pancreatic cancer. Can we talk tomorrow? Dr. Foster noticed my expression change. Everything all right? I showed her the message, then explained what Mr. Nakamura had said about Dr. Martinez receiving bad news about his father. Dr. Foster, who had been practicing psychiatry for 15 years, raised her eyebrows, but suggested we continue monitoring the patient for additional unusual statements or behaviors. That evening, I decided to stay late to observe Mr. Nakamura more closely. His behavior remained consistently calm and cooperative. He ate his dinner without complaining, participated appropriately in evening group therapy, and interacted normally with the nursing staff.
Push that down.
The only unusual aspect was his tendency to make specific, unprompted predictions about minor events. At 7:20 p.m., he mentioned to Nurse Jessica Bryant that she would receive a call from her daughter's school in exactly 18 minutes regarding a playground incident. At 7:38 p.m., Jessica's phone rang. Her daughter had scraped her knee during recess and needed to be picked up early. At 8:15 p.m., he told orderly Marcus Thompson that the vending machine on the third floor would malfunction and eat his dollar bill if he tried to buy a Coke at 8:30. Marcus, curious about this prediction, went downstairs at precisely 8:30 and watched the machine swallow his dollar without dispensing it. By 10:30 p.m., I had documented 17 separate instances of Mr. Nakamura making specific predictions that proved accurate within minutes or hours. These range from minor events like predicting the elevator would arrive to occurrences, like accurately forecasting that Mrs. Rodriguez in room 412 would have a panic attack at 9:55 p.m. But it was his prediction about Mr. Chen that truly disturbed me. At 11:35 p.m., I was making my final rounds when I heard a commotion from room 416. Inside, I found Mr. Chen standing on his bed with a torn bedsheet wrapped around his neck, attempting to secure it to the ceiling light fixture. The time on my watch read 11:42 p.m. 1 minute before Mr. Nakamura's predicted time of 11:42 p.m. We successfully intervened and placed Mr. Chen on suicide watch, but the precision of this prediction was deeply unsettling. How could someone with no access to Mr. Chen's medical records, no knowledge of his psychological state, and no training and risk assessment accurately predict the suicide attempt down to a minute? The next morning, I arrived at the hospital determined to find a rational explanation for Mr. Nakamura's apparent precognitive abilities. I consulted with our neurologist, Dr. Richard Hoffman, who ordered a comprehensive battery of tests including an MRI, CT scan, EEG, and lumbar puncture to rule out any neurological conditions that might explain the symptoms. While waiting for the test results, I conducted a more detailed interview with Mr. Nakamura, this time with video recording equipment to document his responses. I asked him to describe his missing time in greater detail. Doctor, I know how this sounds, but I experienced 3 days as someone else entirely. Not just memories or dreams. I was literally living as other people in other places. I was a construction worker in Detroit, helping to build a skyscraper that won't be completed until 2029. I was a teacher in Portland, Oregon, discussing historical events that haven't happened yet. elderly woman in Miami watching her great-grandchildren play in her backyard. Grandchildren who are blind. Can you be more specific about these future events? I asked. She described technological advances that seem plausible but highly specific. New software applications, medical breakthroughs, political developments. We mentioned names of people who would become famous, natural disasters with precise dates and locations, and cultural changes that felt both believable and impossible to verify. Most disturbingly, he continued making accurate short-term predictions throughout our conversation. He told me that in 6 minutes, Dr. Foster would knock on the door to inform me that there was an issue with room 423. He predicted that the hospital's main elevator would break down at exactly 2:17 p.m. He stated that I would receive an email from my medical school classmate, Jonathan Blake, at 3:42 p.m. regarding a research collaboration opportunity. Every single prediction came true with uncanny precision. Dr. Hoffman's test results arrived that afternoon, and they were more confusing than helpful. The MRI showed completely normal brain structure, with no signs of tumors, lesions, or abnormalities. The CT scan was unremarkable. However, the EEG produced results that Dr. Hoffman described as unlike anything I've seen in 30 years of neurology. Ben, look at these patterns, he said, spreading the EEG printouts across his desk. This patient's brain activity doesn't match any known neurological condition. The frequency patterns in his temporal lobes are completely unique. It's as if his brain is operating on wavelengths that shouldn't exist in normal human physiology. The lumbar puncture results were equally mystified. Mr. Nakamura's cerebrospinal fluid contained normal levels of all expected proteins and cells, but the biochemical analysis revealed trace amounts of compounds that our laboratory couldn't identify, molecules that didn't appear in any medical reference database. On Wednesday evening, I received a call from Dr. Amanda Wright, Chief of Psychiatry at St. Mary's Hospital across town. She had heard about our unusual case and wanted to share information about a similar patient they had admitted 2 months earlier. We had a 31-year-old accountant named Lisa Kowalski. He presented with identical symptoms, Dr. Wright explained. 3 days of missing time, followed by apparent precognitive abilities. She could predict events with impossible accuracy for exactly 1 week. Then suddenly the ability disappeared completely. We never found a medical explanation. This information was both relieving and deeply troubling. Relieving because it suggested Mr. Nakamura's condition wasn't entirely unique, but troubling because it implied we were dealing with a phenomenon that extended beyond a single case. I contacted Dr. Wright the next morning to discuss the case in more detail, and she agreed to share Ms. Kowalski's complete medical records. The parallels were remarkable and disturbing. Like Mr. Nakamura, Ms. Kowalski had normal vital signs, clean toxicology screening, and inexplicable EEG patterns. Like Mr. Nakamura, she described experiencing life as different people in different time periods during her missing days. Most significantly, both patients demonstrated the same pattern of precognitive accuracy that lasted exactly 7 days before disappearing entirely. By Thursday, Mr. Nakamura's predictions were becoming increasingly specific and verifiable. He accurately predicted the exact time when our colleague Dr. James Peterson would call in sick, 9:23 a.m. The precise moment when patient Martha Sullivan would be discharged, 11:47 a.m. And even minor events like predicting that the coffee machine in the staff lounge would run out a regular plan at 2:33 p.m. But his most unsettling prediction came Thursday afternoon. Dr. Voss, he said during our daily session, tomorrow at 4:18 p.m., kind of information would I request? I can't say exactly, because knowing the specific details might change the outcome. But I can tell you that after you receive this information, you'll understand why I'm not actually sick in any traditional sense, and why treating me with conventional psychiatric methods won't be effective. That evening, I found myself unable to concentrate on anything other than Mr. Nakamura's case. I spent hours researching documented cases of precognition, temporal lobe epilepsy, and dissociative disorders, searching for any medical framework that might explain his abilities. Nothing in the literature came close to matching his presentation. Friday arrived with an unusual sense of anticipation. I found myself repeatedly checking the time, wondering what information I might receive at 4:18 p.m. that would supposedly change my understanding of the situation. At 3:45 p.m., I was reviewing patient files when my phone rang. On caller ID showed my former research partner, Dr. Thomas Valdez, of the Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies at Stanford University. Thomas and I had collaborated on several papers about altered states of consciousness during our residency years, but we hadn't spoken in over 3 years. Then, I hope you don't mind me calling out, he said, but I've been hearing through professional networks about an unusual case or treatment, a patient with apparent precognitive abilities. I confirmed that we were indeed treating such a patient, though I couldn't share specific details due to confidentiality requirements. Then, I think you need to know about some research we've been conducting here at Stanford. We've identified 17 cases across the country over the past 2 years of individuals presenting with identical symptoms, 3-day periods of missing time, followed by exactly 7 days of accurate precognitive abilities. The time on my phone showed 4:18 p.m. Thomas continued, "We believe these individuals are experiencing what we're calling temporal displacement events. Our preliminary research suggests they're not actually predicting the future. They're remembering it because their consciousness has somehow experienced time in a non-linear fashion during their missing days." "That's impossible," I said, though even as I spoke the words, I realized how many impossible things I'd already witnessed in Mr. Nakamura. We thought so too, until we started documenting the patterns. Then, every one of these patients described the same experience of living as different people in different time periods. They all demonstrate identical EEG abnormalities, and they all lose their abilities after exactly 7 days, returning to completely normal levels. Common experience is that the research team has been working with field of consciousness researchers to develop a framework for understanding these events. While they hadn't reached any definitive conclusions, their working hypothesis was quantum consciousness theory and the possibility that under certain unknown conditions, human awareness could become temporarily unstuck in normal temporal flow. "The most important thing you need to understand," Thomas said, "is that these individuals aren't mentally ill in any conventional sense. They're experiencing a phenomenon that exists outside our current understanding of human consciousness. Treating them with traditional psychiatric interventions won't be effective because their condition isn't pathological, it's paranormal." After ending the call with Thomas, I sat in my office for nearly an hour trying to process this information. Everything he had described matched perfectly with Mr. Nakamura's presentation, but accepting his explanation meant acknowledging that our fundamental understanding of consciousness, time, and reality was incomplete. I returned to Mr. Nakamura's room to share what I had learned, though I wasn't sure how to frame the conversation professionally. "You spoke with Dr. Valdez at Stanford," he said before I could begin. "He told you about the 17 cases and the temporal displacement theory. How did you know that?" "Because I remember this conversation happening, Doctor. I remember your struggle to reconcile scientific skepticism with observed evidence. I remember the decision you're going to make tonight about your career in psychiatry." "What decision?" Mr. Mr. Nakamura looked at me with that same expression of profound sadness I had noticed during our first meeting. You're going to realize that everything you've learned about the human mind is incomplete. You're going to understand that there are aspects of consciousness that medical science hasn't even begun to explore. And you're going to decide that you can't continue practicing psychiatry when you know that some of your patients aren't suffering from mental illness. They're experiencing realities that exist beyond our current understanding. Over the weekend, I found myself reviewing every case I had treated over the past 22 years. How many patients had I diagnosed with psychotic disorders when they might have been experiencing genuine paranormal phenomena? How many individuals claiming to hear voices, see visions, or possess unusual knowledge had I dismissed as delusional when they might have been accessing forms of consciousness that science hasn't yet recognized? The weight of this possibility was crushing. If Mr. Nakamura's abilities were real, and the evidence strongly suggested they were, then the entire foundation of psychiatric diagnosis might need to be reconsidered. We might be medicating and institutionalizing people who are having genuine experiences with non-ordinary reality. Monday morning brought the expected development. Mr. Nakamura's precognitive abilities had vanished completely. He could no longer predict future events, and his EEG patterns had returned to normal ranges. From a traditional psychiatric perspective, he appeared to have made a full recovery, but I knew that nothing had actually been resolved. We had witnessed something that challenged the very foundations of our understanding about consciousness, time, and the nature of human experience, and we had no framework for integrating this knowledge into practice. I submitted my resignation to the hospital administration that Wednesday morning. In my letter, I explained that I had encountered clinical phenomena that existed beyond the scope of conventional psychiatric medicine, and that I could no longer practice with confidence in a field that might be fundamentally misunderstanding some of the conditions we claim to treat. The hardest part was explaining my decision to colleagues who had worked alongside me for over 2 decades. Dr. Foster was particularly confused by my sudden departure. Dan, you're one of the most respected psychiatrists in the state, she said. You can't throw away your entire career because of one unusual case. But it wasn't just one case anymore. Dr. Wright had shared information about Ms. Kowalski. Dr. Valdez had documented 17 similar cases nationwide. And now I found myself wondering how many other patients throughout my career had been experiencing genuine paranormal phenomena that I had dismissed as symptoms of mental illness. As I cleaned out my office and prepared to leave Riverside Medical Center for the final time, I received a final visitor. Mr. Nakamura, who had been discharged earlier that week, knocked on my door. I wanted to thank you, doctor, he said. You were the first psychiatrist who listened to what I was actually experiencing, instead of just trying to fit it into a diagnostic category. I wish I could have been more helpful, I replied. You were more helpful than you realize. Sometimes the most important thing a doctor can do is acknowledge when they encounter something beyond their current understanding. He handed me a handwritten note as he prepared to leave. What's this? I asked. Something for you to think about in the coming months. I may not be able to predict the future anymore, but I remember enough from my displaced time to know that you're going to encounter other cases like mine. When you do, you'll need to decide whether to return to psychiatry with an expanded understanding of consciousness, or continue questioning everything you thought you knew about the human mind. I read the note after he left. Dr. Voss. The woman you'll meet in Denver next spring will help you understand that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but rather flows through it like water through a filter. The research facility in Northern California will offer you a position investigating paranormal consciousness. Your decision to accept and determine whether cases like mine continue to be misunderstood by mainstream psychiatry, or whether a new field of consciousness medicine begins to emerge. Some doors, once open, cannot be closed. reality of the phenomenon I witnessed. I think about all the patients throughout my career who claim to experience impossible things. Voices from deceased relatives, visions of future events, knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. How many of them were genuinely accessing forms of consciousness that exist beyond our current scientific paradigm? How many were experiencing real phenomena that we dismissed as hallucinations or delusions because we lack the framework to understand them? The note Mr. Nakamura gave me sits on my desk as I write this, and I find myself wondering whether his predictions about my future will prove as accurate as his short-term forecast during that remarkable week in October. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is that if consciousness can indeed transcend normal temporal boundaries under certain conditions, then the entire foundation of psychiatric diagnosis needs to be re-examined. We may be treating symptoms of expanded awareness as signs of mental illness, medicating individuals who are accessing genuine paranormal experiences, and institutionalizing where the mind is perceiving realities that exist beyond the paranormal. I left psychiatry because I could no longer practice medicine despite misunderstanding the conditions and problems of treatment. And maybe, as Mr. Nakamura suggested, the solution isn't to abandon medical practice entirely. Maybe it's to expand our understanding of consciousness itself. The pace has changed everything we do.
Okay, she's gonna need a biopsy.
Patience, and the nature
We'll try
of
to
our
set it
needs.
up.
This was mine. And nearly a year later, it still keeps me awake at night, wondering what other impossible things are hiding in plain sight, dismissed as
Sometimes,
mental illness.
this is